There are 5 layers to your internal operating system, and these layers determine every result you're currently experiencing in your business, from your energy levels to your revenue levels to how you show up as a leader, your team dynamics, even how you relate and respond to the market and your competition. So with that out of the way, the understanding here in this video is I'm going to teach you and show you what your internal operating system is, why it dictates every result in your business and even in your life. And then I'm going to walk you through the specific sequence if you truly want to upgrade your internal operating system. Now, the internal operating system is probably new to you, but the key thing to understand here is that every entrepreneur, every agency owner who's operating at a high level, who truly is a straight line entrepreneur, is consciously or unconsciously upgrading their internal operating system, often daily. And this video is going to show you how you can do it too, and truly how you can break through your revenue ceiling. Because if you're an agency owner right now and you're stuck between 30 to 100K a month, you have all the knowledge, all the systems, and all the processes you need to upgrade and grow and even scale your agency. It's not a knowledge gap. It's not even a system gap. What it is an internal operating system that needs to be upgraded. Now, let me be direct. This video is not mindset fluff. I'm not going to tell you to think positive. I'm just going to technically break down the system, explain it to you as simply as possible, reference each component so you have a full picture of your internal operating system. And then this is going to allow you to truly understand how you can upgrade it, why it's important, why everyone online talks about the internal and the mindset and how important it is, but no one truly gives you a clear explanation, understanding, and then a system. Because what I've noticed, just being in this space for over a decade, building a multi-6-figure agency and even working at one of the biggest agencies in my niche, which at the moment, I think they're doing about 30 million ARR. So let's just say they're pretty successful, is that the ceiling is never external. Now it shows up in your business external. You can see your profit and loss, you can see your actual revenue levels, but it always starts with the operator, the entrepreneur, which is you. And it always starts with the invisible ceilings. It's an internal process, which then gets created and reflected in your business. Now, you probably heard one of the most famous phrases and quotes, which is people don't have business problems. They have personal problems that are reflected in their business. And secondly, you probably heard that life is a mirror and life reflects back to you. These two concepts, the mirror and then personal problems becoming business problems, this will allow you to truly understand your internal operating system. And the only way that you can break through and upgrade your internal operating system is to understand the sequence, to understand what it is, and then to be able to practice it daily. And I'm going to teach you how to do all this and guide you through. So if you actually are now thinking about clicking away, you're probably not ready for this type of work. And I say that, and it's important to me to really preface, because maybe right now you still think that you need a new onboarding sequence, or you need a new email flow, or you've got a go high level template that you need to optimize. That is never the answer. Now, those are all symptoms, but those are not the cause of your problems, for lack of a better word, in your business. It all stems from yourself, and it all stems from your internal operating system. So what is your internal operating system? Now, the first thing to understand is that there are 5 layers and there's a fixed sequence. And this is the system that produces every result you're currently getting. From your identity to your beliefs, to your emotions, to your actions, and to your results. And this is invisible. And what I mean by that is your identity, your beliefs and emotions, and even your intentions are the invisible part. And then the visible part is your actions and your results. Now, you might just be looking at the results in your agency right now, and you go into Stripe or you go into your accounting software and you see that you're at 30K a month revenue, 50K or 100K. That's the results of your business. That was driven by actions, and that could be anything you did from sales to marketing to hiring. But then that was dictated by the emotional baseline of yourself as the entrepreneur, and even your team and even your clients. And then that was driven by your beliefs. And that was driven by your identity. And that is why I say that it's a system that produces every result you're currently getting, because you may just look at the result, but there's a causal chain. Now, the thing is, the ceiling isn't external. It's not your market, it's not your offer, and it's not your team. It is your internal operating system. The thing to understand here is that the internal configuration, your iOS, produces your external results, whether that's in your life or in this case, in your business. And it's a combination really of who you believe you are, what you believe is possible, how you feel, and how all of that translates translates into what you actually do. Now, that may seem a bit vague. It may seem a bit woo-woo, which is why I like to break it down for you into your identity, your beliefs, your emotions, then your actions, and then your results. It's actually a little bit more complex, but I want to keep it super simple for this video just so you get a basic understanding of what your internal operating system is. Now, for you to get a simple understanding, I'm going to introduce the causal operating chain. And this chain is going to allow you to fully understand each part, each component, how it's all interrelated and interlinked. And then you can get a good benchmark of which part of your causal operating chain requires an upgrade. And just to give you a little spoiler and a little teaser, when you upgrade one part, normally you upgrade everything. The key distinction here is that it is a sequence, and for each sequence, there's a certain level of power and a certain level of impact. And to give you an example, if you just go around like a headless agency bro and start doing a load of actions, throwing spaghetti on the wall, throwing shit on the wall, then your actions are misaligned. They could be actually suboptimal. They could be catastrophic. You may do a series of actions, and then before you know it, in a month, 3 months, that your revenue levels dip so much, you've had to lay off your team. Like, there's so much within the whole actions, which is why we have to break it up and look at the transformation where it happens. True transformation, especially when it comes to upgrading your internal operating system, always starts with your identity and then your beliefs. But the causal operating chain here, and it is all upstream, starts as layer 1 with your identity. Then we have your beliefs, and then we have your emotions, your actions, and your results. As I've mentioned, the key part here is that these are effects, not causes. And when I say these, I'm referring to your emotions, your actions, and results. These all stem upstream from your beliefs and your identity, which is why we focus on your identity and your beliefs. And then we upgrade your emotions, and then we change your actions, and then we create your results. In this case, in your business. The key thing to understand about layer 4, which is your actions, is they don't exist in isolation. So right now it's incredibly popular for anyone to sell a program, and it's all about actions, all about implementing systems, tools, and processes. And everyone within this paradigm believes that the only thing that determines your success and creates the results in your business is what you do, which is your actions. Now, I don't believe that, and I've not seen that to be the case, because it's not as simple as handing someone a template and a process and a system and say, do this, do that, follow this step from 1 to 7. Actions can serve you, but what is way more important is not only the emotional baseline and where you're operating from, which is really your levels of energy, because emotions are very linked to your levels of energy, and there's obviously multiple levels of energy. Next, and more importantly, is your beliefs. What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about the world? Or in this context, what do you believe about business? What do you believe about your niche? What do you believe about your offer? All of this can be fundamentally disempowering or empowering. Those are your beliefs. And really, beliefs are linked to your thoughts. So here, this could say beliefs and thoughts, and that is layer 2. But the most important is your identity. And that is where true transformation happens. And your identity is who you are. It's your self-concept. Now, there are multiple ways to explain and understand identity. There's actually like aspirational identities, there's conflict identities, but just to keep it super simple, and the best way to understand this is you have chosen consciously or unconsciously to adopt an identity. And to give you an example right now, I became a dad around 6 months ago. That is an identity. The key part here is being a dad as an identity. Well, obviously millions and millions of people, billions of people are dads, right? But the key part here is it's not just that you have an identity as a dad, or you have an identity as an agency owner, like whatever that identity may be. It's, well, what type of dad are you? What type of agency owner are you? And that is your identity level. Now, when it comes to the causal operating chain, there are really 3 rules to understand. The first one, and this is something which you can't get away from and you can't escape, is that it is always acting. It is the layer, the system which is running 24/7. And that is through your conscious and your subconscious, right? It's inescapable. You can't escape your internal operating system. You can't turn it off. It's a system which is always running. Now, you can reboot it, sleep, but you can't stop it. It doesn't matter if you refuse to believe in this. It doesn't matter. Like, your opinion about your internal operating system or your preference means that nothing. And the way to understand this, like, real simple, is if you've ever meditated and you've set the intention to focus on your breath, your mind probably wandered, and your mind is part of your internal operating system. You actually can't control your internal operating system. That is a fundamentally a misnomer. You can't even control the mind. You can direct the mind, but you can't control it. You can influence the mind, you can guide the mind, but true mind control is just simply false. It's impossible. But in this case, what I want to get across with the 3 rules is that it's always active and it's always running. Once you accept and understand that you have a internal operating system, and just like a computer or a software app, it's always installed. Whenever you log in, it's booted up. Whenever you log out, it's still there. That is the software component of your internal operating system. Next is that it's always top down, because causality flows from your identity all the way to your results. And it's not the other way around. Your results don't create your identity creates your results. Again, I'll briefly come up here just to fully lay this in. Layer 1 is your identity. Layer 2 is your beliefs. Layer 3 is your emotions. These are all downstream. These are effects, not causes. And the key part to understand here is the difference between treating a symptom and treating a cause. Now, you're a business owner, you're an agency owner. I don't have to tell you that if you just went around and tried to solve every problem, some of these problems are reoccurring. And as a byproduct, all you're doing is just solving a reoccurring problem. And that probably feels frustrating, because if you have a problem in your business right now, let's say, for example, you're struggling to get sales calls booked. Is that a sales call books problem, or is it something upstream? Is it because you don't have a system for generating leads, and then you don't have a system for turning leads into clients? There's so many ways to review and look at your problems in your business. But in the context of your internal operating system, it's the exact same thing. Because if you just go around treating symptoms, it doesn't mean that you're actually going to treat the causes. And this is where most entrepreneurs get it wrong, because they try to change results. And let's just take actions as an example, right? They're trying to change results, and they're trying to change results at the actions level. And what they're doing here is they're forcing different actions. And that can be more discipline, more hustle, more willpower. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But you always would spike above your baseline, but then you regress to the mean. And this could be a big month. Maybe you were at 30K and then you just shot up suddenly to 60K a month, and you think, this is it. I've finally cracked it. I've doubled my revenue. And then immediately the next month, when you think you've broken through, you just regress exactly back to where you were. And that's your revenue level. Maybe your revenue level is 30 to 60K. Maybe it's 50K to 100K, whatever that revenue level is. And that's not a failure of discipline. It isn't because you're not a disciplined agency owner. It's not because you took your necessarily eye off the ball. What it is part of the causal chain, and it's a correction. And what it is you forced an action that really wasn't supported by layers above it. And if I walk you through the chain, and we can start with the first 2 layers, you'll actually fully understand how transformation happens. Because you have your actions, you have your results, you have your emotions, you have your beliefs and your identity. Second rule, it's always top down. And then third is it can't be reversed, because you cannot force a result to change your identity. And to understand this, we're going to start with your identity, which is truly the foundation. Now, your identity sets the ceiling and floor for everything downstream. You will never consistently outperform your identity. You can't outpace your identity. And I'll give you some examples here. So if you're the kind of person who burns out, you're always going to find ways to burn out, even when you built systems to prevent it. If you believe you're not good with money, you'll hit revenue ceilings regardless of your skills, because something will always pull you back. Perhaps you believe you're inconsistent. You'll start strong, fade, and restart over and over, even when the tactics are perfect, even when someone has handed you the keys to their business and given you the systems, the tools, the processes, whatever they've done, you will still revert to I'm consistent, because that is an identity. It is an I am statement. And identity is the foundation of everything, because it's who you believe you are, what you expect from yourself, and what feels like you. And the key thing to understand here is that you might spike above it temporarily, whether that's through motivation, pressure, desperation, And that would allow you to push past it, granted. But the issue here is that you will always regress to whatever your identity can hold. And if I make this concrete, if your identity says I'm the kind of person who burns out, you'll always find ways to burn out, even when you built systems to prevent it. If your identity says I'm not good with money, you'll hit revenue ceilings regardless of your skills because something will always pull you back. If your identity says I'm inconsistent, you're going to start strong, fade, and restart over and over, even when the tactics are perfect. Now, the pattern isn't the problem. All the pattern is doing is revealing the identity underneath. And here's what it looks like. Imagine you're an agency owner, and you probably might not have to imagine you hit 80K in a month. This is the best month ever, and this is proof that your model works. And you're thinking to yourself, I've just hit 80, next is 100, right? Next month, you don't follow up on leads, you take your foot off the gas, and revenue drops to 50K a month. From the outside looking in, this looks like self-sabotage. And you might think it is self-sabotage, but from the inside, it's simply because your identity can't hold the 80K. It doesn't feel like you, so your system has corrected. Identity is the true ceiling, and everything downstream conforms to your identity and the ceiling. And then we get to layer 2, which is your beliefs. Now, your beliefs are the logical layer to a degree, and what I mean by this is the embedded operating assumptions that run automatically, and these filter your perception and constrain what you even consider possible. So, you may have a belief around growth requiring suffering, creating overwork, burnout cycles, and the assumption that if it's not hard, it's not real. Or you may have the belief if I slow down, everything will collapse, creates constant pressure, no recovery, and the inability to step back, even when stepping back is exactly what's needed. Or my value depends on my output. Here you're tying your self-worth to revenue. If you have a good month, you feel good. If you have a bad month, you spiral. Your stability becomes hostage to your P&L. Or you may believe I need to know everything before I act. This creates analysis paralysis, slow execution, and the feeling that you're never quite ready. And the thing to understand about your beliefs is that these are the internal rules that govern what's possible, what's safe, what's required, and what's even dangerous. And here's the thing, beliefs aren't necessarily conscious opinions. They're embedded operating assumptions. They run automatically, they filter your perception, and they constrain what you even consider possible. You don't question them because they don't feel like beliefs. They feel like reality. Now, of course, it's prudent to mention that your beliefs, some of them you adopted, some of them you chose, and some of them were just simply handed to you. Someone came along, whether it was from like a governmental authoritative position, your school or your parents or even your friends, and they essentially said, hey, here's a belief, have it. Do you want it? Or there you go, there's your belief. And you just chose it. That you just adopted it and then now that's your belief and it required no examination, no filtering. And you may have had a belief about 10 years ago and now you still hold on to that belief. You may have installed a belief 3 years ago when you started your agency and you still run consciously or unconsciously with that belief. And these are the common ones at most levels within the 30 to 100K a month. Growth requires suffering. And this creates overwork, burnout cycles, and the assumption that if it's not hard, it's not real. Or if I slow down, everything will collapse. This creates constant pressure, no recovery, and the inability to step back, even when stepping back is exactly what's needed. Next, and this one is incredibly common, which is my value depends on my output. This ties self-worth to revenue. You have a good month, you feel good. You have a bad month, you spiral. Your stability becomes hostage to your P&L. Another very common one is I need to know everything before I act. Here, this creates analysis paralysis, slow execution, and the feeling that you're never quite ready. None of these beliefs are consciously chosen. They were installed usually years ago in completely different contexts and they're still running. Beliefs translate identity into rules that govern how you feel and what you do. And that is your beliefs, your logical layer. And one frame to understand your beliefs here is that essentially your beliefs are the thoughts that you've memorized and that you repeat to yourself. And that could be consciously, right? Those are your conscious beliefs. A lot of them are still unconscious, but fundamentally, we all have beliefs. And some beliefs serve us and some beliefs don't serve us. And in the context of your business, you have disempowering beliefs and empowering beliefs. Key thing to understand as I go through the internal operating system process is that you have a choice. You get to decide your identity, your beliefs, your emotional baseline, what you do in terms of actions, and then the results you create. So as I go through this, if any of this feels too heavy or if it feels like doom and gloom and look, here's your internal operating system and basically you're I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you have a choice, and I'm guiding you through each layer so you have the full understanding and the full mechanism of change. And then we have layers 3 and 5, which are the downstream effects. First, we start with your emotions, and these I like to think of it as the fuel. Your emotions are the fuel because there are levels of emotions and levels of energy. Emotions are simply energy in motion. And you've probably heard that before, but if you haven't, then it's a good reframe to understand, which is energy equals emotions. Emotions are energy in motion. Here, this is what determines what actions are even available to you. Because if you're calm and grounded, strategic thinking. If you're anxious, reactive fixes. Crashed, procrastination. Emotions are the fuel layer. They determine what actions are even available to you when you're calm and grounded. Strategic thinking is available when you're calm and grounded. When you're anxious, you're in reactive fixes and avoidance. When you're crashed, you get procrastination. Most agency owners oscillate between spiked, high energy, overworking, running on adrenaline, and then crashed, low energy, can't bring themselves to do what they know they need to do. This is not a productivity problem. This is an emotional baseline problem, and the emotional baseline comes from the beliefs and identities above it. And then next we have your actions. And as I said, these are the visible layer. This is what you actually do, but behavior is an effect. It is not a cause, because you can have forced behavior and this could be a compensation, and you have compensation actions. And normally these are operating and coming from a different place to a true transformative action. Actions are the visible layer, and these are what you actually do. But here's what most people miss. Behavior is an effect, not a cause. Forced behavior is compensation, not transformation. The rule is simple. If it requires willpower over time to maintain, then your iOS has not been upgraded. And then finally, we have results, and these are the output layer. Your revenue, your client quality, team retention. These are lagging indicators that reveal what the iOS was configured to produce weeks, months, even years earlier. If you consistently see revenue ceilings, burnout cycles, team drama, or inconsistent execution, that's not bad luck. That's your iOS producing exactly what it's configured to produce. The remaining 3 layers, your emotions, actions, and results, are the downstream effects. They matter, but they're the outputs, not the inputs. Now, one of the most common business advice is to focus on the inputs to create the outputs. Similarly, when it comes to iOS and your internal operating system, the highest leverage, the highest power comes from focusing on the inputs. Your identity and your beliefs are the main inputs. Your emotions, your actions, and results are the outputs, which is why we focus on layer 1, your identity, and then layer 2, your beliefs. And the rule is simple. If it requires willpower to maintain over time, then your iOS has not been upgraded, because you may have a good month and then a bad month. Anyone can create profit and revenue. Anyone can, I use the gym example, like lift their PR once. But can you do it consistently over time? That's the upgrade pathway. Now, I want to introduce you to the concept that explains why this is so hard to change on your own. And I call this the installed ceiling. This is the heart of the work I do. Your ceiling isn't external. It's not your market or your offer or your competition. Now, it may feel like that and it may show up like that, but there's something deeper. Your ceiling is installed internally, consciously or unconsciously. It's a specific belief identity loop that caps your growth. And here's what most people don't understand. The ceiling operates as protection, not weakness. At some point, your system installed this ceiling to keep you safe, based on past experience, based on what you've learned about what happens when people exceed certain limits. The ceiling isn't a flaw to fix. It's outdated protection that made sense once, but now limits your growth. Every installed ceiling has 4 parts. 1, we have the belief. 2, we have the identity protected. 3, the pattern produced. 4, what it costs. Now, your belief is the limiting beliefs driving your behavior, or just the empowering beliefs driving your behavior. Then we have the identity protected. This is who you think you need to be to stay safe versus growth. And then we have the pattern produced. The pattern produced is the repeated behavior which really maintains your ceiling. And then number 4, most importantly, we have what it costs, what you're sacrificing, what you're giving up by staying at this level. And in the context of your revenue level, it's just simple math. The difference between staying stuck at 30K a month versus 50K a month and 100K a month can be extrapolated across the following month, the following quarter, and the following year. And I'm going to give you 2 concrete examples. But the first thing here, before I give you the concrete examples, is that your ceiling isn't a flaw to fix. It's outdated protection that made sense once, but now limits your growth. And the ceiling operates as protection, not weakness. Example 1 is the eternal preparer. Now, this is a sharp, strategic, knows the game, has the skills, the network, the experience, but they're still stuck. Right now, you might identify as the eternal preparer. You've invested in masterminds, coaching, consultants, you've gone and implemented systems, and you've done all the preparation, and you've finally got to what you may consider the sweet spot. And that may be 30K a month, 50K a month, 100K a month, whatever that revenue level is. Your fundamental belief is I need more proof, more strategy, more certainty before I can operate at the next level. And here's how your identity protects this. You are the smart operator who waits until conditions are right. And the pattern is endless research, course buy-in, strategy seeking, sophisticated procrastination disguised as preparation. And this is what it costs: time, momentum, the compounding that would have happened if they'd moved 2 years ago. So in your case, imagine right now you're stuck at 50K a month. And I want you to imagine a year later, you're at 50K a month. 2 years later, you're at 50K a month. And then 2 years later, you finally break through and you go from 50 to 100K a month. And those 2 years, you're in the internal preparation stage. That was your identity. And you may identify this, or you may have friends in the space or customers, clients, or anyone. And these are the types of things that those types of identities say. I just need to figure out my positioning first. Once I nail the offer, then I'll scale. I'm almost ready, just dialing in the system. Now, they don't have a strategy problem. They have an identity problem. The ceiling isn't their offer. The ceiling is the identity that says, I need more proof before I can break through and become the operator who does 100K a month, 150K a month, 250K a month, whatever that may be. So example 1 is the eternal preparer. Example 2, we have the burnout cycler. Here they have hit 100K months before or 50K months before, maybe multiple times. They know they can do it, but they can't sustain it. Here the belief is my value is in my output. If I'm not grinding, I'm worthless. The identity protection is the hard worker who earns through effort and sacrifice. And the pattern produced here is burnout cycles, can't rest without guilt, measures worth by hours worked, sabotages success when it comes too easily. And this costs sustainable growth, health, relationships, the ability to actually enjoy what they built. And you can hear this. I've always been a hard worker. Nothing worth having comes easy. I'll rest when I hit my goal. Now, they don't have an energy management problem. They have an identity problem. Their worth is tied to their output. So they literally cannot let success come easily. It wouldn't feel earned. They sabotage sustainable growth because sustainable growth would mean they're valuable, even when they're not grinding. And that identity just simply can't survive. Now, the pattern is different on the surface, but underneath it is exactly the same because your system is protecting an old identity from the threat of a new level. As you'll see, both examples are different on the surface, but they're the exact same underneath. The system is protecting an old identity from the threat of a new level. The internal preparer system is protecting the smart operator identity by keeping them in permanent preparation mode. The burnout cyclist system is protecting the hard worker identity by making sure success always requires sacrifice. Neither ceiling is a flaw. Both are outdated protection. And until you upgrade the identity, until you install a new code, the ceiling stays. And this is the key distinction to understand. Without that upgrade, you will stay capped at the ceiling. And if you imagine the ceiling is here and your floor is here, and this is the ceiling, unless you upgrade, the ceiling's going to stay here. And you may slightly push through, but then you'll regress. And the key part to understand about a ceiling, and this is something which most people miss, is over time, just generally in life and business, entropy kicks in. And what that is when order becomes chaos. Basically, order becomes disorder. So you may be stuck at a revenue ceiling right now, and your assumption is that even if I don't upgrade my internal operating system, I still have this ceiling and this is my level. But over time, what I found to be true is your ceiling is still going to lower because you're not actively choosing to grow and elevate and upgrade your ceiling. And now we move into the true problem, which is why other solutions fail. And that's probably a bit of a too strong of a word. So what I want to say here is that they don't succeed, or they're not sustainable, or they're not necessarily the best way to break through and transform and upgrade your revenue ceiling. And the first is business coaching. Business coaching targets actions. Do this, then this, then this. But if your identity can't hold the result that those actions would create, you'll always find ways to sabotage. And then we have mindset coaching. And this mainly focuses on beliefs. Here it's about reframing thoughts, but reframing isn't rewiring. That deep code stays the same. Next, we have therapy, which primarily targets emotions. And it's really the understanding of emotions. But awareness isn't pattern change. You can understand exactly why you do something and still keep doing it. And next we have therapy, which really targets the emotions, understanding them. But awareness isn't pattern change. You can understand exactly why you do something and still keep doing it. And then we have productivity systems, and these focus again on actions, but the structure will always collapse under emotional volatility. All of these solutions work downstream. Sustainable transformation requires upstream intervention. So what happens when you actually upgrade your internal operating system? Well, at the identity layer, instead of I need more proof before I can move, you operate from I act from clarity, not certainty. Instead of I'm the kind of person who burns out, you operate from I am a high performer who recovers strategically. And at the belief layer, instead of growth requires suffering, you operate from growth is a natural byproduct of alignment. Instead of my value depends on my output, you operate from my value is inherent, output is the expression. And then at the downstream layers, the things you used to force become automatic. The emotional volatility stabilizes. The results compound instead of spike and crash. Your old ceiling becomes your new floor. You don't operate at 100K a month. You operate from 100K a month. It's not something you maintain. It's a baseline. That's the upgrade. And once the iOS is upgraded, you don't go back. Not because you're forcing it, but because the old patterns feel uncomfortable. They feel foreign to you. And I'll give you just a little brief story to understand this. I haven't drunk alcohol in 5 years, right? And I have no desire, no intention to drink alcohol, but it's not something that I think and feel and act about. I don't have any issues around being around alcohol or any of that stuff. It would feel foreign to me right now to go down to the pub and order a pint of beer. So this is a good example of a true identity change. I know it's not a business example, so bear with me, but think of something in your life that you used to do that you no longer do, and it doesn't contain any power or energy around it. There's no thinking or decisions around doing it. It's just something you used to do. Another easy example is just to think about when you were a boy. You probably played with Action Men or superhero figurines, and I assume right now you don't do that. And that is a good example and a good reference point just to understand transformation and to understand change and to understand identity change. But here's the thing, understanding the framework is step one. But knowing that the causal operating chain exists doesn't tell you where yours is breaking down. Knowing that installed ceiling exists doesn't tell you which one is running your system, because you may be the eternal preparer stuck in analysis paralysis, always almost ready. Or you may be the burnout cycler, spiking and crashing, unable to sustain. Or is it something else entirely? The first step is identifying your specific pattern, not the general framework, but your actual configuration. And that's what the assessment does. Now, I've created a quick iOS assessment that identifies which of the 5 layers is creating your ceiling. It takes about 5 minutes. You answer 8 questions and it tells you your specific iOS type, the pattern that's most likely keeping you stuck. Are you the eternal preparer, the burnout cycler, the stop-start pattern, or even something else? This assessment shows you exactly which ceiling is installed and what is costing you. And I've put it in the description for free. Take the assessment, get your results, and you'll know exactly what's been running in the background. Now, that's the internal operating system. There are 5 layers. There's one fixed sequence. And then there is an installed ceiling, because the bottleneck isn't in your business. It isn't in your agency. It is the man, the operator, the entrepreneur running it. And that's the best news you'll hear all week, because now you know exactly what your internal operating system is, how you could upgrade it, and you have the free assessment. And as always, take care.